Welcome to Season 2 of Learning to Fly. I'm Eric, and I'm an engineer on the Flutter team.
And I'm Khan. I'm also a developer relations engineer on the Flutter team. If you're around to catch the first season of Learn to Fly, welcome back. And if you're new, thanks for joining us. Learn to Fly is a vlog series where we'll document our journey learning to build something new in Flutter. In Season 1, I built My Dash, a fan club app for Dash's biggest fans. It was a fun project as I was ramping up with Flutter, but for the second season, we're gonna turn up the heat just a little bit. Get it? Heat, and we're using flame? I tried.
This season, we are going to be focusing on building a game called Doodle Dash, a game in which the player controls Dash and tries to get Dash to jump as high as possible by jumping on little platforms. It's like an infinite runner, but vertical. I come from an app development background, and I've been using Flutter professionally since I think 2017, but I've never used it to build a game. So except for Khan's 3-day sprint to build Flappy Dash in the last season, neither of us have any experience building games. We both wanted to take on this project for that reason. We both find the idea of being a game developer pretty intimidating. First off, it seems that there are a ton of moving parts in games, and you have to manage all of them at all times. And second, I don't have much of a math or physics background, and as far as I know, math and physics are both big parts of making games. But I do love playing games, so there's no time like the present to give it a try.
Yeah, I completely agree. I had some math and physics classes in college, and I actually really enjoyed physics class, but even then, taking some physics theory and applying it in code for a game is, well, a totally different ballgame. I promise that's the last dad joke I have here. So the goal for these first 3 episodes of this season is to have the core game finished, fun, and polished. For those of you at home, we'll also have a code lab for you to follow along and build Doodle Dash with us, so stay tuned until the very end. And from there, we'll be looking to y'all to tell us what features you want added to the game. We'll turn those ideas into code and cover it in the upcoming episodes after we've built out the core functionality of the game. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the code. Eric, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So for this first episode, our goal was to have the core functionality of the game complete. This means that we wanted to have Dash on the screen and be able to move her left and right. We're building this for web first, so we're starting with keyboard inputs to control Dash. And Dash also needs to move in the vertical space, which meant we wanted platforms for her to jump off of and move up. But we'd also want some gravity to be acting on Dash and pulling her down. Of course, the point of this game is to jump higher forever, so platforms spawn infinitely. And the game also detects when Dash misses a platform and falls off the screen, causing the player to lose. Finally, we had to make sure the player can't lose by moving too far horizontally, so if Dash jumps out of the view to the right, she'll come back in on the left, and vice versa.
Now that we know our requirements, let's talk about the implementation. We're building this game using Flame. Flame is a 2D game engine built on top of Flutter. Out of the box, it helps with implementing core pieces of building a game, like the game loop, and it abstracts away some of the most intimidating parts of building a game, like collision detection. Plus, the neat thing about Flame is that it's easily accessible just like any other package on pub.dev. To get started, all we had to do was run flutter pub add flame, and we were ready to get coding.
And the goal with our project architecture was to keep things as simple as possible because we don't know what we're doing. In the lib directory, we have the main file and a game subdirectory. And in that game directory, there are 3 files at the top level and 1 more subdirectory called sprites, where we have files for sprites and a barrel file. I can imagine a future in which we'd want more separation of files by concern, but for now, we kept it simple.
The base class for most of Flame is the component class. Similar to widgets in Flutter, you could say that in Flame, everything is a component. Components are the building blocks for every Flame game. We started by making a class called Doodle Dash that extends Flame game. This class is the entry point for most of the rest of the code. It's the central nervous system of the game and generally is used to manage the rest of the components. From there, we added a background. The background is added using another component called the parallax component. This is a component that tells Flame about an image asset, and then the Doodle Dash class can create an instance of the parallax component and register it with Flame.
And registering is done here in the onload method, which you'll override for almost every Flame component. And it's done by calling the built-in add method. And we learned pretty quickly that onload and add are both methods we'd be using a lot in Flame.
Yeah, and so we repeated a very similar process to add Dash to the screen. The difference here is that we need a way to handle two Dash assets, one for when she's facing left and one for when she's facing right. We use Flame's built-in class called Sprite Group Component to solve this. You can give the Sprite Group Component all of the assets that you need in the onload method, and the component gives you the ability to switch between the sprites. Once we added that component, the game looked like this. Great, we managed to get two of the components that we needed on the screen. What do we do next?
After we got Dash moving, the next step was getting platforms on the screen for Dash to interact with. The platform component itself is a sprite component with a hitbox. And a hitbox is an invisible shape that surrounds a sprite that allows the sprite to detect when it's colliding with other objects that also have hitboxes. I really didn't know how to approach the logic for managing the platforms, so I actually went to the repo for Flappy Dash from Season 1 and reused a lot of your Enemy Manager class. You want to give us a quick TLDR on the Enemy Manager class?
Sure, the Enemy Manager class was previously used to spawn the pieces of luggage at random coordinates so that Dash would have to dodge it in Flappy Dash, but now for Doodle Dash, it's called Platform Manager.
So the logic from Enemy Manager to Platform Manager has remained mostly the same, but we did add some additional logic to continually spawn more platforms as Dash jumps off the platforms and she's moving upward. The Platform Manager creates new platform components and adds those platforms to the screen at semi-random coordinates. Once the platforms were rendering, we needed to work on what was one of the more intimidating parts, in my mind, collision detection. But it turns out implementing collision detection was easier than expected because Flame does a lot of the work for you. First, we added a hitbox to Dash so that both Dash and the platforms had hitboxes. Then I used a mix-in from Flame on the Dash component that provides the component with an on-collision callback, which is called by Flame when two objects collide. When Flame calls on collision, it passes a reference to the other object being collided with into the callback, which in this case is a platform. Because the on collision callback is called on the Dash object, we were able to determine whether Dash was moving up or down when the collision happened. So then we can say if it was moving down when it collided with the platform, jump up. If it was moving up, it should just move through the platform without triggering a jump. And this is a great example of the value that Flame provides. The calculations needed to determine if a collision was happening seems like it would be quite difficult to do on your own.
The other interesting part about Dash is that we needed her to be acted on by gravity. There had to constantly be a force that was pulling her down. As a result, we stuffed the logic for gravity in Dash's update method. Whatever her velocity was, we subtract a constant value from her y-axis speed to pull her down like gravity would. You see an update method in essentially every Flame component. Update is an important method because it's called on every tick of the game loop, which is once every frame. It allows you to incrementally move components on the screen, so instead of looking janky, the movement looks smooth and natural, especially important for sprites. It's a good lesson that I learned from my attempt at building Flappy Dash.
And from there, we deployed the game to Firebase hosting to get it live, and you can play it right now at the link in the description. But keep in mind, it's deployed as is at the end of this episode, so it's a little boring. After each episode though, we'll update the game to match the state at the end of that episode.
We have to keep y'all on your toes. So Eric, this was your first time working with Flame. What do you think was interesting and challenging?
Well, the most challenging part for me was getting the camera right. The camera is supposed to follow Dash as she moves up, but stop when she's moving down, and the game ends when Dash misses a platform and falls off the screen. So if the camera was always following Dash, the game would never end because there would be no falling off the bottom of the screen. And I did eventually find a way to solve this, which was basically to reset the bottom bounds of the camera within the game component's update method. And this might be the best way to do this, but it does feel weird to be doing this sort of computation on every frame tick. But it is funny now because the code is relatively simple, but I was really banging my head against the wall for a while trying to get this part right. And what about you? Any struggles in particular?
Yeah, I mean, gravity, definitely gravity. I know from physics class that gravity is, 9.8 meters per second squared. Thanks, Mr. Mott and Mr. A. But, what am I supposed to do with that in Flame? How does it translate? There was a lot of trial and error there for me. But yeah, so far, how are you feeling about Flame and making games now that you've been working with it for a bit?
Well, I still feel wildly unqualified for game development. And I'm feeling even more like real games would be extremely difficult to program. But I don't feel as intimidated by it. I feel like I don't know anything, but I could learn whatever I needed, given enough time, of course.
Yeah, I totally feel the same way there as well. I mean, I think the great thing about using a game engine is that it makes things a little bit easier to pick up. I mean, we don't have to implement the most complex parts from scratch, which is absolutely great.
Yes, absolutely great. But anyways, now that we've built this portion, what could we do better? What did we miss?
Well, the first thing I noticed when testing out our game was that it's not responsive. I resized my window and Dash does not jump nearly far enough to make it to the other side of the screen, so that could use some work.
Yes, that's on me. I completely missed that. It's a major oversight since we're targeting the web where the screen could be so many different sizes. I'd like to also tweak some of the details, like the number of platforms that render, Dash's jump speed, gravity speed, and stuff like that. Because right now it technically works, but it's not challenging and it is boring.
Well, that sounds like something that we'll definitely need to tackle in the next few episodes. But for now, I think that's a wrap on the first episode of Learn to Fly Season 2.
Yeah, and in the next episode, we'll be adding in more game functionality that should exist in every game ever, like a start screen, the ability to pause the game and keeping score. And we'll also be adding some elements that make the game more interesting, like different levels of difficulty and different platforms. And this is where you all come in. While the first 3 episodes of this season are dedicated to the core functionalities of the game, the rest of the season is pretty open-ended, so let us know if there's anything that you'd like to see. Like what characters would you like to see, or any game mechanics that you'd like to see in the game in the future.
And if you're getting antsy waiting for this game to come together, just letting you know that you can build the entire completed game that we're building with the Build a Game with Flutter and Flame code lab that's linked in the show notes right down below. With that said, thanks for joining us on this episode of Learn to Fly, and well, we'll see you tomorrow.
Adios.